judge the elevation like a mortar, and there was a little attachment, and you'd take the pin off the hand grenade and stick it in there, and there was a thing to hold the handle on until it was fired. And like I said, I don't know of anyone that ever did that anyway. Just throw it.
Then you were ready for Vietnam, or not?
Nobody's ever ready, but we were as ready as we could. At least we knew how to use our weapons. Because when I got there, the M60 machine guns were still in the crates, and I was the first one to get there that knew how to open it up and use it. So.
Okay, so you're at the airport now.
Oh, that was an adventure. Yeah, we went to the airport, and there were hundreds of people there. And we found out soon that there was a backlog. They were backlogged for days. So when the plane that we were scheduled to go out on came up, we were pushed aside. And they said, all day long, just keep watching the board and see if you can get on any of these planes. And at the end of the day, we would run to a transient barracks and get a bed and a locker and put your stuff in it and get a meal, and you had a place to sleep. If you didn't run, there wouldn't be enough beds, and you'd have to come back to the terminal and sleep on the floor in the terminal. And this went on for a week. Wow. You talk about disorganization. All the planes, they didn't have enough planes to get us over there. None of the planes were military. They were all charters from all the airlines, however many planes they could get there. They had stewardesses, and just like a regular civilian flight, they were mostly Boeing 707s. The difference was they only had a ham sandwich or a beef sandwich, and they had cola or uncola. That's the only beverages you could get.
But at least you got some food.
Oh, that's right.
You
That's
certainly
right.
don't get that now. You know, the picture I have is way back in the 60s, stewards and stewardesses wore these really neat uniforms, and you did get the meal. And this almost seems surreal to me. You've got, you know, that personnel looking like that, and then you've got soldiers coming out with their weapons.
Some
their
had
uniforms.
weapons, but I don't think anybody had any ammunition. I don't recall how that worked. I knew people had weapons getting in line. I didn't. Mine were waiting for me in the other end. But yeah, there was people from all branches, and we took off and we flew to Alaska. And then I think these crews went a leg or two of the trip with us, and then they came back the other way. So we flew to Alaska, and it was cold. It was January. And then, you know, so you're seeing winter, big time, big adventure for a 19-year-old kid. Then we flew to Japan, and we refueled, and the sun was coming up over Mount Fuji. That is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, looking out the window. And then we flew to the Philippines. And we got off the plane, and it was like the worst humidity I think I've ever felt. I was just in Alaska a few hours earlier. What an adventure. And then we flew on to Saigon. And like I said, I was not stationed in Vietnam. I was stationed in Thailand. So we flew on to Bangkok. And then we were there for 2 or 3 days for indoctrination.
Okay, and at first, did you think that you were going to stay in Bangkok?
No, I knew I was not.
You knew
Right,
you were not.
right.
And what is Bangkok like?
Bangkok is like Chicago, Los Angeles, any major city anywhere in the world.
Any
Hong Kong, I would,
metropolitan.
It was an R&R point for soldiers in Vietnam. It was a fun place to be.
And you instead were put on a smaller plane and sent off to
Yuban.
Yuban. Okay,
There
we
were
have
like-
we have the map up now, and
Yes. There were like 7 or 8 bases over there. But 2 of those bases, ours and to the north of us, NKP or Nakhon Phanom, were pretty close to the border of Laos. And we were also fairly close to the border of Cambodia at Yuban.
you had a nice analogy to give us an idea of what Yuban was like as compared to Dubuque. Could you tell us
Well, Dubuque is, if you look to the east, you have Wisconsin to the north and Illinois to the south. And from Yuban, it was a little further, but Laos to the north and Cambodia to the south. So you had the potential for those people to slip over the border and try and disturb us bombing them all night long.
I guess one of the questions I'm curious about is, did you get any sort of orientation? Because you're talking about the fact that your small town is Dubuque small town. I think it is a small town Midwesterner, and look where you went. You went from here to Alaska, to Saigon, to the Philippines, to Yuban in Thailand. Any orientation? Any clues to how you were supposed to react or?
Well, there were some papers I gave us, some things they went over about etiquette with the Thai people. How to treat them, what to do, what not to do, what things you could buy that were nice trinkets to send home to your loved ones, and not a lot about the dangers we would face at that point.
Okay, just general customs.
Sure.
Okay, once in Yuban, what was your job? Guarding more planes initially?
It was a brand new base for the United States. And it was an old base for the Thai Air Force, and that was kind of interesting because they flew P-51s World War II. And then across on the other side of the base, the Australians had a fighter base, and those were F-86s. So they were flying Korean warplanes. And then we moved in with all of our F-4 Phantoms. And since it was brand new, we needed a lot of defenses because they thought that we would, over time, have security problems. So everyone that went in there who was enlisted had to spend 2 weeks building bunkers. And there we came from being below zero to working outside where it was pretty warm even in the winter over there. Building these bunkers, taking sandbags and building bunkers.
Okay, and those bunkers were the home of you and who else?
Okay, when the bunkers were new, they were fine. But as the bunkers got older and people sat on them and moved around on them in the rain and the wear and the tear, the bags would separate. And within the walls of the bunker would be scorpions and poisonous snakes and lizards and all kinds of things. So if you sat on the bunker, you tend to keep your hands on your lap or whatever. You didn't stick your hands down there where some little critter could
take a little chunk out of you. Oh, how awful. We talked a little bit about the fact that you had to be trained on the newer weapons. What about any training for this job that you were supposed to do at Yuban? Did you get any special training there?
Well, I was doing security, protecting planes in Michigan, so I was going to protect planes there. And so it started out to feel just the same.
Except for the weather.
Well, in the United States, you would stand around under lights and challenge someone who walked up to you and check their credentials. And it started out that way over there. I was around a flight line the first few weeks, and I was checking Americans. Why else would they be there? Dressed like Air Force people who were coming up to put bombs on the planes or refuel them or maintain them. And a lot of noise all the time, bright lights at night and a lot of noise from ground power units and so on. So you would never really hear if anything bad was going to happen around you because you're right in the midst of all this noise.
How could you? That's true. So any training, you relied on what you knew from Michigan, and then it was sort of on the job.
We figured it out together as we went.
One of the things that you mentioned before is, when I talked to you before, is the fact that you had weapons, but you really weren't told to use them in the very beginning.
In the beginning.
Why?
I think it was an agreement that our government made with their government, that we were not going to be armed, and that we were going to hire some of their people and supervise them while they secured the base. So we began to have problems, so we moved away from under the lights. We moved out further into the darkness, and we had a group of these people, and there'd be a few of them in between each of us, and we had a nightstick and a flashlight, and they had the old carbines that we used to carry, the old M1 carbines from the Korean War. And I became very uncomfortable. I was reading about conscientious objectors and wondering why I couldn't be one. Why did I want to die because something happened and I didn't have a weapon to defend myself, or worse yet, I'm reading about what's going on in Vietnam where they're hiring